Remembrance Day, lest we forget, it's a time to remember the many sacrifices paid by our soldiers to allow us to enjoy the freedoms we have today. And it's also a time to review how our society and government treats veterans and their families. Joining me now is Wayne King, a retired Canadian Forces colonel and service officer for the Lethbridge Royal Canadian Legion. Good to have you with us once again, Wayne. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, so Wayne, when did you first enlist in the armed forces and what motivated you to get involved? I see you're quite decorated there.
Yes, I joined the Royal Canadian Air Force in 1959, and my motivation was probably very similar to that of young men at the time. I wanted to participate in supporting our society. I certainly hoped that I would be able to pursue a flying career, which fortunately I was able to do. And never looked back from that time.
Right. And, of course, war is never something on our wish list, but, it happens. Of course, many believe that it's necessary at times. Can you talk about the importance of fighting for freedom?
I think all we have to do is think back to the circumstances that existed, for example, during World War II, the horrendous uh, situations that were being imposed upon various peoples within Europe, the programs to eliminate basically the Jewish nation from Europe, and the desire on the part of at least one of the warring nations to gain territory, to increase their posture in the world, and to dominate other nations. Sometimes it becomes necessary to stand up for your rights, stand up for your beliefs, and unfortunately, that leads to war.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. You mentioned you enlisted in 1959, so that would have been obviously after World War II. But did you see any action at all with like any of the other wars that were taking place?
Well, yes, I was quite close to a number of armed activities. I did participate briefly in some of the um activities in Vietnam. I was at the time seconded or serving with the United States Air Force, and I was in Vietnam very briefly, fortunately, but nonetheless, I was firsthand witness to what was going on there.
I can't imagine some of the things you saw.
Well, yes, war is never a pleasant activity, that's for sure. Anybody who's ever been involved certainly very quickly comes to the appreciation that it's to be avoided if at all costs, but sometimes it just can't be avoided.
Yeah, that's true. One of our producers had read that during the First World War, Lethbridge had the highest per capita enlistment of soldiers anywhere in Canada. So, has Southern Alberta always been supportive of veterans?
Southern Alberta has always been very supportive, very generous in its support of the veteran community. Uh, in our current situation, the current laws that exist, Freedom of Information Act, and so on, there's no way I can give you an accurate count of the number of veterans either within Lethbridge or within the surrounding area. However, I would personally estimate those to be in the order of 2,000. But the people of Lethbridge have been very generous in their support and continued involvement with the veteran community. There's no question about it.
Yeah, and 2,000, that is a pretty large number, especially for such a small city like this. Now, of course, this is the time of year where we all wear our poppies, and sometimes little kids might ask, why do people wear this red flower pin every year in November? Can you share a little bit about the history and the importance of the poppy?
Well, the poppy came about uh, many, many years ago, and it became a symbol of remembrance, a symbol of recognition of the sacrifice and the contribution of those in uniform and others in our community who were heavily involved in the war effort, and it is a very important symbol for all of us to display because it does signify remembrance and acknowledgement of the sacrifice of those in uniform who some who gave their lives in defense of our freedoms, but others who certainly served and were equally impacted in many ways in the support of our society.
How do you think we're doing this year compared to others when it comes to the number of people actually wearing poppies? Are the numbers up or down?
Well, I'm always disappointed when I go out in public and see the number of people displaying the poppy. I would like to think that, particularly at this time of year, that the poppy would certainly have a very significant presence in our society. Unfortunately, that's not true. I've been out and about on a daily basis, and I find the older generation, uh, by and large, are more prominent in their display of the poppy. As the society gets younger and younger, the number wearing the poppy is fewer and fewer, and certainly on a broad basis, we're looking at definitely less than 10% on any given moment who actually wear the poppy. And at the Legion, we very strongly advocate the wearing of the poppy. The poppies are available at no cost. We're grateful for any contribution or any donation to the support of veterans, but the poppy itself, there is no cost, and they're readily available, and we would encourage everybody to wear them.
Yeah, and like you said, they're free, so everyone should be wearing them. You mentioned also a donation. Where does that money go?
The money goes to what we call the Poppy Fund. It is a fund Canada-wide and first localized at the branch level and then administered through various command structures. Each province has its own command structure, and then uh, Dominion Command have established criteria on the use of the Poppy Fund in support of veterans. And as long as the use of those funds adheres to the rules laid down, then it can be used in direct support of veterans or those organizations supporting veterans.
Wonderful. You mentioned that when you're out and about, you see people wearing the poppies. It's generally the older generations, and as you
Yeah.
look to the younger ages, you see it less and less. It kind of surprises me because I think the schools definitely do their part with teaching the young kids. But how well are we doing with younger generations remembering? And do we need to do more to help our kids appreciate the sacrifices made for our freedoms?
We need to do whatever we can to ensure that our younger generations are well aware of the sacrifice of their parents, grandparents, and other members of their families in support of our freedoms. But I am heartened by virtually every school having ceremonies either immediately prior or within the few days of Remembrance Day, and that is one opportunity to bring the sacrifices to the minds of the younger generation. We must always remember because, as the adage goes, if you fail to learn the lessons of the past, you are bound to repeat them. And unfortunately, in today's world, we're at risk, very grave risk of international upheaval.
Now, what kinds of needs and challenges are older veterans facing right now, Wayne?
Well, the needs of the veteran community are wide ranging, and it depends on the experience of the individual veteran in service. When we talk about veteran disabilities and so on, we must remember that it's not only those who suffered a disability during a time of active warfare, but also in the so called peace years. I question the use of peacetime because in many respects, it is a war. We have to be prepared for war to prevent war. And but the needs vary a great deal. Those suffering from uh, disabilities such as PTSD and so on are equally disadvantaged, and in many cases more so than those who have suffered loss of limb or eyesight, as an example. And the needs vary from ongoing medical support to full care in many cases. So
Yeah.
it's varied, but very real to the veteran community.
Yeah, and you mentioned PTSD there, and we hear these stories of veterans struggling with it. And so, what would you like to see changed in the way help is being offered to these situations and these veterans suffering from post traumatic stress disorder?
During the last number of years, the amount of support being provided by the Department of Veterans Affairs and so on has increased significantly. But we must always remember that there is a degree of bureaucracy involved, one which makes it difficult in some cases for the veteran to access the support that's available, or at least to understand the programs that are available. The support is there, but sometimes access to it lacks the speedy application that we'd like to see.
What would you say to a young person watching right now who might be considering a career in the armed forces?
I must admit that my view of the military and the value of the military life dates back now many decades. It's a different world now with the technology available to our society and so on. A technology that wasn't even thought of when I first joined, let alone be available. I would, however, continue to advocate that the youth of our community certainly seriously consider a role or an active participation in the military, if not in the regular services, then through the reserves. The benefits are enormous: self discipline, training, education, and so on. And I think it's well worthwhile. I would suggest to the society as a whole that our military right now is very uh, vulnerable to any armed conflict. We have gone through a number of years where the governments of the day have decided not to uh, come up with adequate funds to equip the military, to enable the military to man its various responsibilities, and to prepare not only the military, but also our society in general for conflict, which unfortunately over time will be on our doorstep.
Yeah. Are there any areas that you'd like to see the government spend more money on since you think that our soldiers aren't currently properly equipped?
Well, just to give you a couple of examples,
Okay.
when I retired, or in the time that I was thinking about retiring, I was part of the staff officers in Ottawa who was commenting on the next generation of aircraft, fighter aircraft, the Air Force. That was in the late 1970s, and the aircraft was the F 18. Well, that was the aircraft we bought, but and we're still flying it 50 years later. The grandchildren of the officers who participated in the analysis of Canada's need at the time are the active pilots on those aircraft. Grandchildren are flying them. That kind of
Wow.
hardship or that kind of lack of updated military equipment is true also of the Army and of the Navy.
Yeah, it's a little
Right now,
scary when you think about it.
well, right
Yeah.
now, Canada is undermanned for our responsibilities. We are under equipped, under trained, And I fear to say we are unprepared for what may come down the road and face us.
That's a
It, it,
sobering, yeah, it's a sobering thought for sure.
yeah, it's time that the country came to the table and started to put the monies required. The country formally agreed to the NATO request of minimum levels of funding, and we have failed to meet that consistently. And our budgets, quite frankly, now would have to be doubled just to meet the absolute minimum required by the agreement that the country has undertaken.
Oh, that's terrifying. And of course, a reminder that Remembrance Day is November 11th. There's a number of ceremonies, Remembrance Day ceremonies taking place throughout the country, including here locally. Can you remind our viewers about attending local Remembrance Day events? What, when, and where?
There will be two ceremonies in Lethbridge. The first and largest will be at the exhibition grounds. If you wish to attend, that is always well attended by the people of Lethbridge. I would suggest that you be present there at about 10:30 in the morning, and the ceremony will commence at about 10:45. There will also be a ceremony at the cenotaph itself, again starting at about 10:40 in the morning, and the at the cenotaph you'll have the opportunity to see the flypast by the Globemaster aircraft flown by 49 Squadron, and that is the squadron, by the way, that the city of Lethbridge adopted during World War II. So there is a long history between the men and women of 49 Squadron and the city of Lethbridge. And those two ceremonies are happening at the same time, but I would strongly encourage all who are able to attend at least one of those.
Yeah, there we go. Sounds good. Wayne, we're out of time, but thanks so much for being with us today. Appreciate you as always.
Thank you very much.
Wayne King is a retired Canadian Forces colonel and service officer with the Lethbridge Royal Canadian Legion. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.